Hi, I'm Dr. Clay Cavinder. I'm the new State Extension Specialist for Equine here in Mississippi. And I want to welcome you to the first installment of a monthly series called The Main Event. And what we're going to try to do is basically present some tips and tricks, some management type situations, maybe some topics on nutrition every month, and maybe 5-10 minute type videos to bring some education and knowledge to the state wherever you are. Today what we're going to talk about is some simplistic stuff, and this first one is going to be kind of a three-part series to discuss basic body control of the horse. And so what we're going to do today is discuss how to gain control of the horse's face. Next week will be more of the barrel and the shoulder, and then we'll finish with the rear, the hind end, in order to get a horse that's really supple. That's the goal here. And it doesn't matter what you do, whether it's barrels and poles or reining or cow horse or over fences. We all have to have horses that are supple and responsive to the bridle in whatever we do. So while this may be somewhat simplistic in gaining access to the face, it's very, very critical that I watch some other pieces of the horse as I go through the procedure of getting this horse broke in the face. We should also all understand kind of what the basic attributes of training a horse are, and it's real simple. It's three basic principles. What I want to do is, number one, is provide a cue to the horse. And that's going to be in the way of using my leg or my hand or my voice if I cluck to make him go faster or whatever it may be. Number two, I'm going to listen or watch for the response of the horse. So once I provide a cue, I'm going to look and see what kind of response the horse gives me. Based on the response that he gives me, is going to let me know what I need to do in step three, and that's going to be reinforcement. Reinforcement can be positive and negative based on what the response of the horse was. So if I provide a cue for this horse to turn left and he gives his nose and he walks left, then my reinforcement is simply going to be to let go and let the tension out of the rein. If I ask this horse to go and I squeeze with a little bit of leg and he doesn't go any faster, my reinforcement would be negative by applying a little bit more leg or a little bit more of the cue in order to get him to respond. So if I know that and understand that, everything I do with training is going to be fairly simplistic. Provide a cue, wait for a response, and based on the response that I get is going to tell me how I need to reinforce that response. So what we're going to do today, this is a 3-year-old gelding that I've had for a little bit, and what I want to show you is just kind of the very first thing I do with trying to get access to this horse's face and get myself in a better position as I go into more advanced training methods. If I someday want to put a lead change on this horse or teach him how to do a sliding stomp and I don't have control of the face, then I'm in trouble. So very simplistic idea, but very, very important as well. So really easily what everyone knows is to do is to basically walk this horse around, and as this horse, if I want to go to the right, I'm simply going to pull on that rein and tip his nose to the right. Very easy. But the things that I'm looking for that could be problematic are just there how he's bowing his shoulder out and moving off to the left. And I want this horse to follow his nose. I want his body to follow his nose. So whichever way I turn him, the shoulders and the hip need to follow along with him unless I ask them to do something different. But you also notice that I'm giving and taking as I ask this horse to move around. So right now I've got slack in the rein and he's still going to the left and giving me his nose. As he gets straighter and I pull his nose there, I'm letting go. So the thing that's really important there is I want to try to promote as much softness in this horse as I can. Of course, if he's the first time riding horse, I'm really maybe having to over-exaggerate my pull and ask this horse to really step into the turn. But what's critical here is that when I do that, I'm rewarding him with positive reinforcement when he does give his nose. So he's learned through doing this enough that when I go ahead and pull on this rein, he knows that really softly that I can get that nose to come to the left. And as I come back to you, then I'll just flex him back the other way with a real soft pull, and I get him going to the right. If he tried to, when we started riding this horse and he didn't want to give his nose that direction, and he didn't. He really was resistant. So I think about some of the problems that come along with that is he would take his nose and want to push to the outside, which is pretty normal, typical for most horses to do when they're young. First time they've had something in their mouth, maybe you ride with a side pull, the first time they've felt pressure on their nose and their face. So that's okay. The thing for me to think about is where is this horse at? how old is he, and what kind of reinforcement do I need to apply? So let's think about that for a second. If a kindergartner or a first grader, a young kid makes a mistake, we don't give him 6 smacks on his behind to teach him to not do that. We might just simply ask him to show him what the right thing is to do, or we don't do this or do that. We might be easy going with him. So the same thing with this horse. If he tries to really push his nose out and pull away from me, all I'm going to do is simply keep that pressure there. And the moment that he steps that direction, I'm going to release, okay? And then when he does that, if he gives his nose at all, and I release that pressure, I'm sending a message to him that he did the right thing. So he can make the choice to stick his nose that way. He can make the choice maybe to stop and waller around. He can make the choice maybe to go a little quicker. But the pressure never goes away until he gives the right response. So in the moment that he gives the right response, that's usually when our riders make the most mistake, in that they don't release quick enough. Don't get discouraged either that when you release a young horse that he immediately goes back to the other direction. When you pull this way, he goes that way. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Keep him going and keep asking all the time. The other thing I'm really cautious about, which will be something that we address in week 2, is kind of what these shoulders are going to do as I pull the nose around. Horses that are really stiff and don't want to flex to that direction, a lot of times when I pull the nose this way, I get their whole body leaning that way, and that's not what I want either. I want this nose to be independent of the shoulder and that to all be independent of the hip. I want that to all work together when I want it to. But I want to have control of this horse in all the pieces. So when I pull his nose to the right, and he drops to the inside, and let's see if I can kind of give you a look. I can probably manipulate him enough to make you see what I'm talking about. So we're saying we're riding along and we go to push him over that way, and we get this kind of turn where the whole shoulder and everything's coming with it, with the nose, and we're not independently controlling the nose. That's easy fix. What I want to do there is just basically use my leg to push that horse forward and hold that position with my hand. So here I'm going to the left. If he runs his shoulder to the middle, all I'm gonna do is use my leg to move him forward. And when I do that, it moves those shoulders forward, but at the same time is keeping this nose tipped to the inside. So I'm teaching him, and when he does give me his shoulders back up and he's following that nose back around, not dropping in on me, when he does that for a step or two, I'm gonna go ahead and relax and release, and then maybe I'll pick that back up again. So all that does is teach him that he can drop his shoulder in there, but we're gonna listen for the response because we provided the cue. He gave us the wrong response by moving his shoulders. And the third thing we need to do is reinforce. So the negative reinforce here is a very, very light, just moving our legs to move that body forward. If he's falling to the inside, but we use our legs to move him forward, he has no other option but to keep those shoulders driving forward while my hand is tipping his nose to the inside. Same thing if he drifts to the outside. Maybe I'm driving around here and I ask him to tip his nose here, and you can see how our body's being arced to the outside there. I simply do the same thing, but with maybe a little more right leg. I'll drive those shoulders forward, and the moment he gives his shoulder back to follow his nose, I'll release the pressure. So in all those cases, I'm teaching that when I pick up, you've got to give to your nose. You've got to give to the bit. So that's going to be very critical when I start talking about collection and then moving into more advanced maneuvers, stopping. I see so many riders that they pull on their horse, and the first thing their horse does is root out and nose out and push away from the pressure. That's not something we want either. We want every time we pick our hands up, this horse gives to the bit with a soft touch. Okay, same thing in the back up. If I pick up and ask this horse to back up, he should drop his nose and give to the pressure. He shouldn't resist me and push forward with his nose. Some other things that kind of come up when we're doing that, another good quick tip on that same kind of thing is as we're standing around, I want to be able to tip the nose to the inside too. So you see a lot of riders that are standing here and they pick up this way and they'll stand there and then they'll go this way and pick up the nose, and that horse is given to real soft pressure. But one thing we don't realize sometimes is the look that I'm looking for as well. It's not just this horse does this neat little trick where he puts his nose back on my toe, but watch the ears here. I want to see on the right hand side, see how the right ear is lifted higher than the left? That's kind of the look I want right there. And I don't have any pressure here. I'm just holding him a little bit. When he tries to bump straight, I touched him back to the right. But those ears tell me when they're tipped that way, that tells me if that inside ear is up or elevated above that outside ear, that tells me that when I pick this rein up, this shoulder's lifted. because he's looking back here, so this shoulder has to be lifted. And same thing the other direction, that ear has got to be up on the inside, and that tells me that shoulder's lifted. So that when I'm moving and walking forward, I have those shoulders in line. They're not falling or drifting to the inside or outside of my circle. As we start to talk about all these things that we're going to be doing with our horses and training tips, one thing to really keep in mind is our horsemanship. And a lot of people take that for granted and thinking that that's for the Western horsemanship riders and it's a pretty look but not functional. We want to be functional riders for the main reason, especially for young horses, is that we want to provide a consistent cue every time. So this horse has no doubt in his mind when we ask him to do this or do that, it's the same cue every time. And if we're out of position as riders, then that cue may be off just a little bit. You know, the thing I think about a lot of times, the horse is standing in a stall or somewhere and a fly lands on their back. They can move the fly that's that big out of the way and not move any other parts of their body almost. So a horse is very sensitive to the touch, the cue that he gets. And if we're off a half an inch, that could be a drastic difference in what we're asking this horse to do. So when we're talking in consideration of this horse's face today, I want you to think about your hands a little bit and where you place your hands. So if I'm walking this horse and tipping his nose, this hand position may change over time. A young horse, I may have to really open this inside rein up and move that nose to the inside. But in a horse, as he gets to kind of know what's going on, I want you to think about asking this horse to go, having this horse go where your hands go. So I think about the horse going where my hand goes. If I open this hand way up, it's going to cause him to drift forward into the left. And if I bring this hand back to my pants pocket, it's going to tighten this front end up just a little bit and ask him to step over a little bit more than it would if everything was forward. So think about your horse going where your hand goes, and as you get better at tipping this nose, draw your hand to your pocket, back to your belt line, and asking this nose to stay nice and tight and low, and our circles to get smaller as this horse gets more knowledgeable. Like I said though, in the beginning, your hands may have to be out here to really ask this horse so he clearly knows what you're asking him to do with that inside rein. So think about horsemanship as we go along and start talking about more advanced things. You'll hear me talk a lot about where our feet are, where our legs are, what cues we're providing with our seat, because it's all about rhythm. And our seat is very important. Horsemanship is critical to what we do, and so we want to make sure we incorporate good horsemanship technique. So that's kind of the things, the quick tips I want to talk to you about. Practice with your horse just pulling his nose around independently of his shoulder, and next week we'll get back to you and start talking about the shoulder and the barrel and how we get control of that, and we'll kind of start thinking about why that may be important. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Main Event.